Hey, sorry it took me so long to get back on here. I just wanted to talk about the statue that is at the UN building, the one that's called the Ferocious Beast of International Peace and Security. And I had done videos in the past about some of the other statues, like the beating their swords into plowshares in some of my video, and I also talked about how they dredged up this ancient statue off the coast of Greece, I believe it was, and it is actually, I believe it was Zeus, and that statue is inside the UN building in Manhattan, and we know from the Maccabees that that's the abomination of desolation that was put in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. So they have it in the UN building from ancient times that they dredged up from the bottom of the sea, which to me is highly significant far as a beast rising up out of the sea. And we know that it's a bunch of, nations, that the sea is a sea of peoples, of nations, and the UN fits that description, of course, because it's all the 70 nations. And then you have Israel, and of course the Sanhedrin of Israel wants to replace the United Nations with a 7-nation body, with the Sanhedrin as the world court, with them at the top of the chain, and then the 70 nations under them, so they can pretty much rule the world from Jerusalem. Of course, I did some research, and I wanted to share the things that I found and discovered about this particular beast statue, which you might find very interesting. And I just wanted to share all the things that I put together so you can see the whole picture of what it's all connecting to. And obviously, a lot of it is pretty self-explanatory, so I don't need to go into all the detail about, the peace and security, sudden destruction comes. We all know that, and there's just some connections that you're going to find interesting here. Before I go into that, I just want to ask people to pray for all the people in the states that were affected by the tornadoes that have literally just wiped places off the map and killed a bunch of people. Arkansas, we had Tennessee, we had Kentucky, we had Illinois, and I hope I'm not leaving anything out. But we had a lot of devastation, and a lot of people are hurting, and a lot of people are without their homes now. And all I can tell you is that we live in a fallen world where we're all subject to all of these, with the earth being under a curse from Adam and Eve's sin, until the Messiah comes in the redemption and the curse is reversed. We all are subject to illness, and we're all subject to tragedies that happen that are unexplainable. And may God give us strength in these times. And I also heard that Franklin Graham's group, Samaritan's Purse, is already on scene helping people there. So you might look them up, and if you want to help them out, you can help them through that organization. So I just wanted to pray, Lord, give these people strength, the people that have lost their loved ones and their family members, especially right before the holidays. We just lift them up, and to show them that there is eternal life in you, in Yeshua HaMashiach of Nazareth, because you died for our sins to reverse the curse as the second perfect Adam that had no sin. And we just lift every single person up that's affected by these horrible storms and these devastating deaths. Comfort those who are mourning, and we share in their tears, and we share in their sorrow and the grief that they're going through. And we lift them up to you to strengthen them through the power of your Holy Spirit. Help them to find places to live. Help them to be taken care of during these horrible situations that they're all in. God bless them all, and God provide for every one of their needs. In Yeshua's name I pray. And we just bless all of these people that are struggling and suffering. There's just a whole lot going on in the world, as we know. So I just wanted to share that in my heart towards these people that are suffering. As we know already from numerous videos on this subject, that the latest statue that they put up at the UN was the one, a lot of people have made videos about it, Lisa Boyce, a lot of people. So Papacy watchers are watching what's going on and reporting on this, that a guardian for international peace and security sits on the visitors plaza outside UN headquarters. The guardian is a fusion of jaguar and eagle and donated by the government of Oaxaca, Mexico. And it is created by artists Jacobo and Maria Angelis. And this UN photo was by Manuel Elias. In case you didn't see the statue, this is it. It's got the eagle's wings, and it's representative of a jaguar. And this article is titled, "A Ferocious Beast Called the Guardian of International Peace and Security Has Been Installed at the United Nations." So a little bit of this article I wanted to read was from adventmessenger.org. So this beast is a peacekeeper. Even though this monster looks like it's about to rip your face apart, I assume this is the new peace we can expect during the Great Reset. Either we accept the globalist demands coming from the United Nations, or we will be eaten by the rainbow beast. Nothing says peace and security like the cultures in pre-Columbian Mexico that built massive temples filled with human skulls. The Aztecs, Mayans, and other Mesoamerican cultures all participated in human sacrifices. The truth is that these civilizations weren't known for their peace, but for their cruelty and conquest. However, the Papacy, the beast of prophecy, who likewise professes to be the custodian of international peace and security, has also exhibited the same kind of peace. Regrettably, we already know where their peace will lead to, and it's the 1 Thessalonians 5:3, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." And we also have, and this is not all of the verses, so I'm just picking two of them, Daniel 8:25, "And through the policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand." Now I had a video, so I actually revealed in that video that I believe that he's going to be a Grand Master Mason in regards to the Antichrist. And that masonry is considered craft. But also it's interesting that when you sculpture a piece of artwork, that's known as a craft. Now, if you saw my video about the false god images that they're putting on the cryptocurrency in the form of the NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, and I talked about how the mark of the beast is connected to the word token, and I wanted to talk about the word Charagma again, which is the word for mark in Mark of the Beast, which is Strong's 5480. And I talked about this before with the artwork, and I talked about how they're putting all kinds of artwork on the NFTs for being able to buy and sell. But the thing that I told you in that is that I did not realize until I looked this up again in that video, where the mark is not only a badge of servitude a stamp, a scratch, or etching. But specifically, I was looking at this for the first time, was sculptured figure statue. Sculptured figure statue, graven mark. What I find very interesting is that that beast that is called the International Guardian for Peace and Security is actually a sculptured figure. I think it may be made out of fiberglass. It's a statue, it's a sculptured figure, just like the definition of Charagma, or mark of the beast. Now let me just show you something, the difference between a jaguar versus a leopard and how you can tell the difference. You can see the difference between the jaguar on the left and the leopard on the right. How to tell the two cats apart from wildlifediaries.com. Here you can see on their website too, it shows the jaguar at the top and the leopard at the bottom. Now that you know the difference between the two, let's look at Revelation 19:20. But the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who had performed the signs on its behalf. With these signs he had deluded those who had received the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The two of them were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur, or the lake of fire. Now, if you'll recall, the place where this statue was sculpted was Oaxaca, Mexico. And Oaxaca is where I talked about the color for the crimson worm, the Toliat Shani color, and they have a whole rainbow of colors of dye that was used in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And Oaxaca has the best possible farms of the Toliat Shani, the crimson worm that makes all of the colors that go in the priestly garments and things for the temple in Jerusalem. So that's interesting to connect Oaxaca to Jerusalem, to the temple. And now we've got this statue that was sculpted in Oaxaca that's with the 70 nations as some sort of guardian of international peace and security. Right there I can see how they could get an inroad to the third temple with their prophetic dyes that come from the Toliat Shani, crimson worm, from Oaxaca. It's the best dye that there is to be found in the world. And so this sculpture that's at the UN is from Oaxaca, Mexico. These type of composite sculptured animals are known as Alebrijes, and they are fantastical animal figures made of paper mache or carved wood. And I think they're using fiberglass as well. So now you're going to find this next connection that I discovered with this incredible. Alebrijes are represented in Mexican folk art as vibrant, fantastical creatures that often resemble dragons, lizards, and other mystical creatures in the animated Disney film about Day of the Dead. Coco, Alebrijes are spirit animals that guide the spirits of ancestors on their journey. So this is connected to the Day of the Dead. The word Alebrijes means imaginary or fantasy, describing a style of animal carvings with exceptional paint schemes. Now, I know that they bring this here to the town where I live, and I can't stand it. It's called the Day of the Dead, and they have the Day of the Dead bread called Pan de Muertos. Is prepared all around Mexico in the last days of October and the first days of November, and it's one of the elements used in the altars set to honor the souls during the Day of the Dead celebrations. The bread symbolizes a fraternal offering to the souls. The origin of the Alebrijes can be traced to Pedro Linares. He's an artist who lived in Mexico City in the 1930s. Linares said that in 1936 he was very ill and then became unconscious. While in a state of unconsciousness, he began to hallucinate and see visions of a forest with strange animals. Native to the valley of Oaxaca in Mexico, Alebrijes are animals that escaped the nightmares of an artist and appear as a variety of different species, both real and fantastic. Pedro Linares, 1906 to 1992, a renowned indigenous Mexican artist, first created vividly colorful papier-mâché sculptures called Alebrijes. Linares passed away in 1992. Today, Linares' descendants continue with the family business, making the now iconic Alebrije figurines, Judas Iscariot, and skeletons in La Merced in Mexico City, while many papier-mâché artists craft these fierce creatures around the country. So now, it not only is connected to the mythical creatures that are mentioned in the book of Revelation, but also connected to the son of perdition, which is Judas Iscariot, and they make these effigies in papier-mâché of Judas Iscariot, and they destroy them with, like fireworks inside the papier-mâché body. I found this to be a really stunning connection that I discovered when researching about these animals. These are papier-mâché figures symbolizing Judas Iscariot stuffed with fireworks that are exploded in local plazas in front of cheerful spectators. The Judas exploded in public spaces can measure up to 5 meters, while 30-centimeter ones can be found with a firework in their back to explode. You can do that at home, like a firecracker. The burning of Judas is an Easter time ritual held by Orthodox and Catholic communities. Effigies of Judas Iscariot are burned, hanged, flogged, or exploded with fireworks. Once widely practiced across Europe, now it can be seen only in Greece, Portugal, and Spain. The Spaniards and Portuguese spread the tradition around their colonies, and it is still celebrated in Mexico, Brazil, and Venezuela. And here you can see the effigies of Judas Iscariot hanging and fireworks going off inside one of them. The burning of Judas is a Mexican custom for Holy Saturday. The custom is practiced in other Catholic countries and is a scapegoating ritual commemorating Judas' betrayal of Christ. It takes place on Sábado de Gloria, or Holy Saturday before Easter Sunday, usually in public squares. And I found this on Alhambra figurines, Judas. Now remember what Charagma is: a sculptured figure. These are sculptured figures or figurines, depending on, like if it's a big tall statue or if it's just a little tiny thing you put in your home. These are figurines, sculptured statues of Judas who betrayed the Messiah. Now you're going to find this interesting too, because when it talks about the Linares family in Mexico City, they are among the best known practitioners of a craft known as cartoneria, or the use of papier-mâché to create hard sculptured objects. So craft will prosper in his hand. I think that's very interesting. Not only does it have a Grand Master Mason connection, but these are practitioners of a craft that creates these sculptured figures. They have an international reputation for the creation of forms such as skeletons, skulls, Judas figures, and fantastical creatures called Alebrijes. While the family's history in the craft can be traced back as far as the 18th century, it was the work of Pedro Linares who invented the Alebrijes that made the family famous. Pedro's work became internationally famous through the patronage of artist Diego Rivera and the promotion of it at the 1968 Olympic Games and through documentaries. Pedro died in 1992, but his sons and grandsons continue with the craft, which is sold internationally. There's something more to the Judas Iscariot celebration, I guess you'd call it, tradition. One of the more important traditions associated with Cartoneria in Mexico is that of the burning of Judas on Holy Saturday. This began in the colonial period with two possible origins. The first says it came with the Spanish, more specifically by the Franciscan friars for evangelization purposes. The second says, get this, it began as a parody of the executions held by the Inquisition, with Cartoneria dolls given to children as representing heretics. The Judas are hollow figures of cardboard and paper mache, which are usually larger than life size. I already told you what they do to them. So, the Inquisitions connects it directly to the Papacy. Think about the things that they did to this paper mache doll, this effigy, image, sculptured figure, statue, graven image, which is Charagma. Very interesting connection. Connected to the Papacy through the Inquisitions and how they tortured people, and millions upon millions of people were executed. Now there's also a leopard statue that stands outside of Mysore Palace in Karnataka, India. And this beast looks a little bit ferocious too, but it doesn't have the wings, and it looks like this. What's very interesting about that is that I discovered that the reason why they sculpt the jaguar in Oaxaca, Mexico, is because the jaguar is pretty much the cat of the South American, Mexican countries, and the leopard is actually the cat of Russia. And also Iran, or ancient Persia, had the leopards, and they're even trying to protect the leopard species. So we have two connections to the leopard with Russia, and that being the cat of Russia. And that's why in Oaxaca they really don't make the leopard, they make the jaguar, because that's the cat of Mexico and South America. So the leopard is Russia and also is in Iran. So that explains why the sculpture from Oaxaca, Mexico has the jaguar, because that's the famous cat from there. And it's supposed to be a spirit guide to guide you on your way, or to guide the dead on their way. So it has this connection outside the UN of being connected to the Day of the Dead, this offering of bread for the souls of the dead on an altar, and its connections go back to the pre-Columbian days. And of course we have the rainbow, which we know the rainbow represents God's covenant with mankind. And of course all of the 70 nations, that would be representative of God's covenant. However, it's been used, as we know, by a whole nother group of people, which you can fill in the blanks there. I wanted to tell you about, in Oaxaca, everything is done with the soul. because it says, in our land, the spirit dances, paints the spirit, cooks the spirit, writes the spirit, and the state president, together with the honorary president of DIF Oaxaca, Yvette Moran de Murat, Rockefeller Center CEO E.B. Kelly, the consul general of Mexico, was in New York, Jorge Islas Lopez, and dozens of New Yorkers were in New York City because guess what? They had more of these types of statues from Oaxaca. One of them was also a winged jaguar, and one of them was a dragon. We know that the dragon gives the Antichrist his power. And they had this dragon statue from Oaxaca, just like the statue at the UN building with the winged jaguar. And here's a picture of the jaguar with the wings on the left and the dragon on the right. And this was in Rockefeller Plaza. And this is the other photo they took of both statues. So now we have a connection between the guardian of international peace and security. We have a connection to the dragon. We have a connection to the papacy. We have a connection to the Day of the Dead, and offering on an altar to the dead of this dead bread, I guess you'd call it. And then there's the connection of Judas Iscariot's effigy. And interestingly, they connected the artwork to one of the rock bands called Judas Priest. So they're really using an image of Judas and turning it into artwork. So that's just another element of the sculptured figure statue that's a graven image in the word mark of the beast. This is a close-up that they showed of the dragon. Now they have another sculpture there. I already talked about a couple of those sculptures at the UN building, but there's a statue called Good Defeats Evil. That one was created by Russian painter and sculptor Zurab Tsereteli. The sculpture commemorates the 1987 signing of the Treaty on the Elimination of Immediate Range and Shorter Range Nuclear Missiles, INF Treaty, and is in celebration of the 45th session of the General Assembly, created as a monument to peace. The sculpture is composed of parts of actual United States and Soviet missiles. The work depicts an allegorical St. George, one arm raised, as he drives a lance through a double-headed dragon. The dragon's laying on the ground and he's driving this sword through there. The dragon in the sculpture is not the mythological beast of the early Christian tradition, but the specter of nuclear war vanquished by the historic treaties between the Soviet Union and the United States. Accordingly, the dragon is shown lying amid the broken pieces of Soviet SS-20 and US Pershing missiles. Actual fragments of these weapons have been used in the sculpture, and that was donated on October 5th of 1990. So you've got the dragon right there, and then this other jaguar winged mythical creature outside the UN, and of course they're sculptured statues or figures. So here's that picture, and you can see right here is the dragon's head, and he's laying on his back with the lance going through him, and you can see the little dragon wings or whatever, and the missiles there at the bottom. So at the UN, you have the dragon and you have the mythical beast. And it might interest you to know that there's also a sculpture of a very large knotted gun modeled by Carl Friedrich Reuterswärd. Conceived in 1985, Christian art Patrick van der Vorst, writing on the website Christian Art, reflects upon the sculpture Non-Violence, also known as the Knotted Gun, by Swedish artist Carl Friedrich Reuterswärd, sculpted as an oversized Colt Python 357 revolver. Its muzzle is tied in a knot and therefore unusable. The artist made the sculpture after the murder of John Lennon. In 1988, it was moved right outside the UN headquarters in New York. It's kind of interesting that the recent cinematographer shooting involving Alec Baldwin involved a Colt revolver. And that's exactly what's in this sculpture, is a Colt revolver. And we also had the sculpture Sword to Plowshares, given to the UN from the USSR in 1959. So these sculptures that are made in Oaxaca that were on display in the Rockefeller Plaza, and this was apparently October 22nd, 2021. It's the Day of the Dead that was mentioned here. Dia de los Muertos comes to New York City with a dazzling display of Mexican folk art, sculptures of Oaxacan Alebrijes envisioned as guardians of the nation's immigrant community, and Katrina's Day of the Dead skeletons were now at Rockefeller Center. So they had these horrible skeleton sculptures that were standing there too, that were really awful. Now this is a Jaguar Alebrijes sculpture designed by Ricardo Angeles of Atelier Jacobo and Maria Angeles in Oaxaca, that was now at Rockefeller Center. And all of these photos were by Valentina de Lecia for Hyperallergic. You can see this sculpture here. Virtually the same thing as you saw outside the UN building. Though coinciding with spooky season in the U.S., the tradition differs vastly from Halloween in its life-affirming tone and its rejection of death as a finality. Those who want to connect with the spirit of Dia de los Muertos in New York City can now visit Rockefeller Center, where a presentation of dazzling Mexican folk art will be on view starting today, which was October 22nd through November 2nd. Works by Atelier Jacobo and Maria Angeles in Oaxaca and by Mecaca Studio, a Mexico City-based organization specializing in Huicul arts and crafts, will lure city dwellers, both living and incorporated. In the Manhattan landmark Center Plaza, Angeles Atelier presents two towering Alebrijes, vibrantly colored sculptures of animals and mythical creatures meant to serve as spiritual guides. An 11-foot dragon and a 13.5-foot feathered jaguar, both rendered in fiberglass. The first Alebrijes were created in the early 1930s by Pedro Linares, an indigenous Mexican artist using papier-mâché in the southern state of Oaxaca. Artists have continued the tradition in the medium of carved and painted wood. And then it shows the two sculptures, which was the dragon with the winged jaguar. The founders of Angeles Atelier, Maria and Jacobo, attended an unveiling ceremony today along with son and principal designer Ricardo Angeles. In an interview with Hyperallergic, the artist described his Alebrijes as guardians for the nation's immigrants. I love New York and its architecture, especially the Art Nouveau styles and the gargoyles of some buildings, Angeles says. I decided to create fantastical beings that also symbolized empathy and solidarity from us, the artisans who didn't immigrate, toward our family members who are here in the United States. We wanted to give them these guides, to look over them, to let them know they're not alone. That's why we included designs related to netting or frontiers to reference the Mexico-U.S. border, he added, pointing to the dragon's legs which are decorated in a gray fence-like pattern. It's very much a symbol of the present, mixed with my family's very traditional symbolism, Angelus continued. So they have, along with these other two sculptures, they have these sculptures of these dead people. One of two Katrinas flanked the entrance to 30 Rockefeller. Flanking the entrance to the famous skyscraper at 30 Rockefeller Plaza are two Katrina's skeleton figures representing the Aztec goddess Matenketuhitl, Menchaca Studio. I'm saying that the best I can. The elegant skulls, donning floral hats, are perhaps the most recognizable symbols of Day of the Dead, and inspiring the distinctive makeup, elaborate costumes, and even the pan de muerto, or bread of the dead, found on many altars during the festivities. So now take a look at these and see if this wouldn't scare the daylights out of you. Katrinas are one of the most recognizable symbols of Day of the Dead. So now you get a good picture here of this. I just can't really deal with this too much. And here's the other one that stood out of 30 Rockefeller Center Plaza. Not something I really want to run into or look at. I'm going to skip a little piece of the article, but it says, in our country, we have earned the recognition of our people by seeing Oaxaca as the reflection of the soul of Mexico, said the state's governor, Alejandro Murat Hinojosa, during today's ceremony, because Oaxaca reflects the richness of our culture, our art, our history. But in another way, Oaxaca has its own soul. It has 16 indigenous people, more than 102 dialects, and it is one of the most biodiverse states in Mexico and in the world. When you think of the Alebrijes, you think of Zapotec cultures, which said before they existed in their physical form, they represented the Niwot, the spirit inside us, the purpose of life, he continued. By being here today with the Alebrijes, we confirm our purpose. ABC7NewYork.com reported Midtown Manhattan from WABC, a colorful celebration of Mexican culture in October and early November was now on display at Rockefeller Center. An 11-foot dragon and a 13.5-foot feathered jaguar stand guard the iconic Rockefeller Center. The art installations are part of a colorful collection of work in celebration of Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. The Mexican holiday was on November 1st and 2nd that paid respect to relatives and friends who have died. For us, it's important that we remember, said Jacobo Angeles. Now, he's the one who made the statue at the UN of the jaguar with the eagle's wings. He says, on an altar, we place a photo of our families and offer their favorite food, drinks, and music. Maria and Jacobo Angeles are the artists behind these Alebrijes, or Mexican folk art sculptures that serve as spirit guides. It looks to me that this same jaguar that's got the eagle's wings that was put in Rockefeller Center during the Day of the Dead looks to be the same type of statue. It's either the exact same statue that was moved to the United Nations building, or there's two different statues. Now, there were all kinds of little figurines of the dead, skeletons and skeletal sculptures of figurines that you could purchase there in the plaza, all kinds of their artwork that go for the Day of the Dead celebration. Let me just give you a little bit deeper history of the Alebrijes, and it says they are brightly colored Mexican folk art sculptures of fantastical mythical creatures. The first Alebrijes, along with the invention of the term, originated with Mexico City Cartonero Pedro Linares. Linares often told that in 1936 he fell very ill, and while he was in bed unconscious, he dreamt of a strange place resembling a forest. There he saw trees, rocks, clouds that suddenly turned into something strange, and some kind of animals, but unknown animals. He saw a donkey with a butterfly's wings, a rooster with bull horns, and a lion with an eagle head. And all of them were shouting one word, Alebrijes, Alebrijes, Alebrijes. Before this happened, he was already a cartonero artisan. Upon recovery, he began recreating the creatures he had seen in cartoneria, the making of the three-dimensional sculptures with different types of papers, strips of papers, and glue made out of wheat flour and water. His work caught the attention of artists Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo because they used to purchase Judas figures from Pedro Linares. In the 1980s, British filmmaker Judith Bronowski arranged an itinerant Mexican art craft demonstration workshop in the United States featuring Pedro Linares, Manuel Jimenez, and Maria Sabina, a textile artisan from Oaxaca. Although the Oaxaca Valley area already had a history of carving animals and other types of figurines from wood, it was at this time when Bronowski's workshop took place that artisans from Oaxaca learned of the Alebrijes papier-mâché sculptures. Linares demonstrated his designs on family visits, and which were adapted to the carving of a local wood called copal. This type of wood is said to be magical, made from unitaro magic. In the 1990s, the artisans of Oaxaca began to use the word Alebrijes to designate their figures carved in wood. The papier-mâché to wood carving adaptation was pioneered by Arizola native Manuel Jimenez. This version of the craft has since spread to a number of other towns, most notably San Martin, Tilcajeta, and La Union Tel Jalapan, and has become a major source of income for the area. The success of the craft, however, has led to the depletion of the native copal trees. Attempts to remedy this with reforestation efforts and management of wild copal trees has had limited success. The three towns most closely associated with Alebrijes production in Oaxaca have produced a number of notable artisans such as Manuel Jimenez, Jacobo Angeles, Martin San Diego, and Julia Fuentes and Miguel San Diego. And that is about the Alebrijes from n.m.wikipedia.org. On lolomarketito.com it says Alebrijes imagination, fantasy, and folk art. There is nothing more representative of Mexican and Oaxacan folk art than the vibrant colors, exquisite detail, and a deep symbolism that's displayed in magical Alebrijes. For decades, indigenous towns in the state of Oaxaca dedicated their lives to follow the wood carving tradition that their ancestors passed down centuries ago. Today, implementing a more modern tradition filled with imaginative elements, skilled artists bring to life products of their own mind and the tales they know, making Alebrijes a product filled with magic, folk tales, and culture, each unique to its creator's imagination. And they say about these sculptures that they are creatures that live in our dreams, mind, and are connected to our spirit. And remember, I just did a video about delusion. In this article says, the origin story says that while very ill with high fever, Pedro Linares, and it says Lopez, had a delusion where mystical creatures that looked like animals in brightly colored skin chanted the word Alebrijes over and over again. Although feeling terrified of these strange-looking yet familiar figures, this hallucination caused his fever and illness to stop, making him consider these creatures as guides and protectors. And then after this, he began sculpting these creatures that were hybrids of different types of animals. Now, what's interesting is I found an article in the Los Angeles Times that said I'm trying to see a date here. This was April 12th of 2020. Residents of El Espinal, Mexico, marched in solidarity with El Espinal native Hector Alejandro Cabrera Fuentes, who is in U.S. custody on charges of being an unregistered foreign representative of Russia. And the title is, "In Oaxaca, this scientist is a hometown boy made good. The U.S. says he's a Russian spy." So now you've got the connection of Russia is the leopard and Oaxaca represents the jaguar. And I think that's very interesting. Now I have one more thing to sum this up. Basically, this was reported on November 17th of 2017 by Will Stewart from mirror.co.uk. A sculptor planned to present Vladimir Putin with a bizarre statue of him as a winged bear, and it says with no testicles. It says a sculptor wants to present Vladimir Putin with his bizarre statue of him depicted as a winged bear. Viktor Kropotchev claims he was seeking to impress the Russian president through his odd iron-coated creation he has called Brain, Strength, and Soul. The figure shows Putin with the body of a bear with the wings while holding a fish with noticeably, he says, no testicles. It's said to be a symbol of Putin's leadership. And he planned to present the work to the leader personally, but attempts so far to cite the statue have been refused. And I can understand why. So now let me sum this up really fast because I'm running out of camera power. We have a statue of the Russian leader in a bear costume with wings. We have the Alebrijes sculptures and figures of these ferocious beasts, one of which is the dragon that was with the winged jaguar, that's now outside of the UN building as guardians of international peace and security. We have the connection to the Day of the Dead and the offering of this pan bread to the dead on an altar inside people's homes. We have a connection to Rockefeller Center. We have a connection to Judas Iscariot, the son of perdition. So bring that all together in one big picture, and now you have a fuller story of what you need to see and understand that I now see and understand through doing this research, and I'm revealing to you now are incredible connections that come together. And especially the thing really freaked me out about Judas Iscariot being part of that tradition there. Let's not forget that it's a connection to the Catholic practice that they do before Easter and put Judas Iscariot in effigy and do all kinds of things that are torturous to this effigy that's supposed to represent things that were done in the Inquisitions. I'm kind of blown away by all of these things and how they're connected. So that about sums it up for tonight. And I really thank you for watching, and I hope you got a lot out of this. And I just wanted to share everything that the Lord was putting on my heart and that I researched and, found all these connections out. So I'm just adding this to the framework of what's going on and how it relates to the mark of the beast and the image of the beast and the Charagma and the sculptured figure, statue, graven mark. If they use one of these figures that represents all of this as some sort of stamp or mark on the forehead or on the hand of those characters that are guardians supposedly outside the UN building in the future, we will exactly know that it is connected to the mark of the beast, and we need to keep our eyes and ears wide open. For now, I'll talk to you later.